Welcome, guys, to another episode of Legal Nerds. I'll hand it over to my co-host, Daniel Uhlfelder.
How you doing? Good afternoon. We're here on another episode of Legal Nerds, where we discuss the hot legal topics around the country, which are abundant by far. So today we've got a special guest, an election law professor from Stetson here in my home state of Florida, Professor Chara Torres-Spelliscy.
You got it right.
Thanks.
Nice.
Yeah. And she's got a new book out, and we've got a lot of interesting topics that we're going to cover today in terms of challenges to Vice President Harris being on the ballot. And we've got an expert in the area of election law that will be able to answer a lot of our questions, and we know questions that you have as well. So thank you for being on the show today, Chara.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I just what I'm going to do this time, since we have a co-host. This isn't like Morning Gem where it's just me. I'm going to monitor the chat, you guys. So please, if you have questions for the professor or Daniel and I, throw them in the chat, and I'll try to raise a few of them. But before we begin, asking you some questions, I'm going to play a clip to set this up, okay? Because Daniel did mention that we want to talk about some of the challenges. And you might be thinking, what challenges? Kamala Harris just became the presumptive nominee like 48 hours ago. Joe Biden just stepped down on Sunday. Legal challenges, huh? Okay, let me play this for you, and we'll talk on the other side.
Jason Chaffetz, this whole idea and this whole notion that maybe they should get a different candidate, that's not the way the system works, folks. You can't just go to your convention and say, well, it's not going to be Joe Biden. We want it to be Gavin or Gretchen or somebody else. That's not the way democracy works. And for the party that says they want to save democracy, that's not the way our system
real
works.
Quick, Jason, you're telling us, and we talked about this before we came on camera, even with Joe Biden's participation, most people say, well, the problem is Joe Biden would never give it up. You're telling us, even if Joe Biden said, okay, you're right, I'm not doing well, I don't think I can win, they can't switch out names on ballots.
No, it depends on the states. Elections are not run by the party. They're not run by the federal government. They're administered by states. Each state has state law. Once you go through the primary, once you go through the caucus, you have to follow that law.
Okay, so before I ask Chara the first question, obviously this was happening in the run-up to Biden resigning, trying to create chaos and scare everybody, Democrats, Republicans, anyone, that he wouldn't be able to step down safely. Take it from here, Chara.
So the idea that Republicans could file some sort of lawsuit to get Harris off the ballot is just legal hogwash. There is no workable cause of action where one could do such a thing.
That's pretty, you seem pretty confident in that. I think there might be more to this. Daniel, do you want to throw a question at the professor?
Yeah, we know that I know that's not a legal term, hogwash, but we have a situation, as we are all aware, that there are courts around the country that are listening and actually approving legal hogwash, even all the way up to the U.S. court with new theories. So is there any, I know you don't believe there's any merit to, but can you maybe explain what you do know about what their theories are, at least, so we can, be aware of what they're potentially arguing?
Sure. So the argument is that each of the 50 states has their own election law, and that is true. But here, we don't have a nominee yet. We had a presumptive nominee in Biden. He has bowed out graciously. And now the delegates of the Democratic Party have coalesced around Vice President Harris, which is their choice and is consistent with the Democratic Party's rules. And ultimately, under a case called California Democratic Party versus Jones, which is a Supreme Court case from 2000, the Democratic Party has a First Amendment right of association, and they have the right to choose their standard bearer. So there is going to be very little wiggle room for any plaintiff to allege that it's somehow illegitimate for the Democratic Party to pick their presidential nominee. It's just utter nonsense.
So I'm going to follow up on that question, which is notably Chaffetz was kind of eliding the period of time between when Biden might have at that point stepped down and when Biden stepped down and the nominating conventions. And he sort of kind of blends these together. And so let me ask, though, about the state of Ohio. And then I want to ask about Donald Trump's predicament with J.D. Vance separately. But the state of Ohio had a law that was recently amended that you're aware of, right? That has, I think, an August 7th deadline. Can you speak to that and to whether you think it's wise or unnecessary that the DNC, the Democratic National Committee, is planning to have a virtual roll call before the convention to lock in Kamala Harris as their presidential candidate and whoever she selects as the VP?
So what happened in Ohio is they are Republican controlled both in the legislature and in the governor's house. And they decided not to waive their typical deadline for when you had to notify the state that you were a candidate. And that was their position for a really long time.
Wait. They wouldn't waive it, because even knowing that the Democratic convention was going to be mid-August, and they said, hey, guys, could you just push it out a little? They said, no, forget it.
Yeah. Okay. And in previous elections, they have waived it. And specifically, they've waived it for Republicans. And so more recently, they actually passed new legislation that will waive the deadline. The trick is that that particular deadline is now waived to, I think, September 1st. And then the oddity is the law itself doesn't go into effect until September 1st.
Right, because it's a 90-day, they have a 90-day waiting period. That's weird, but yes.
Yeah, so there could be some strange tortured lawsuits that make some weird argument about this moving of the deadline was itself illegitimate. But ultimately, even under the independent state legislature theory, it's the legislature that gets to make these rules. So right now, Kamala Harris is not in violation of any state law. It would have been a lot trickier if Biden had become sick or died after the convention and he had been the nominee. But that is not the situation we have now. We have a presumptive nominee who is bowed out, and then we have his vice president who is ready to take up the reins.
One follow-up, and then Daniel, I'll let you ask a few, which is one thing that I noticed that you did not answer in my question, although you answered everything else, was, do you think it's wise, despite this cockamamie or hogwash theory, if you were advising either in a legal or just a politically strategic capacity, the DNC, would you say, don't take any chances, do the roll call, or would you tell them that seems weak, just do whatever you want?
Oh, I would do belt and suspenders here because so much is on the line. So it probably makes sense to have the virtual roll call first and then a more ceremonial roll call during the televised convention so that you've dotted your I's and crossed your T's.
Sorry, Daniel, I promised that you were going to ask a question, but I saw someone in the chat saying that they were unclear. Oh, no, they were talking to each other. You were perfectly clear. Okay, Daniel, your turn.
Yeah, the Ohio. So could you explain a little bit more about the dates? And we just want to know, because it's controlled by the Republicans. So is there any possible way they could not put her on the ballot?
I really don't think so. And I have full faith that there are very talented lawyers who will be right in court if there are some shenanigans. Mark Elias has a sort of outstanding record for both defending Democratic candidates and defending the democratic process itself. That's what he's been doing the last 4 years. And those lawsuits and his defenses of good laws has been wildly effective. And so there is a deep bench of election lawyers who are willing and able to help with this fight.
Great. I want to ask you, though, before the show, we were talking a bit about another case that might be brought or is being brought, this one by Donald Trump or planned, challenging Kamala Harris's campaign's access to the funds that were in the Biden-Harris campaign. Can you speak to that? What's going on there?
Okay, so the New York Times just reported that the Trump campaign has filed a complaint with the FEC alleging that it is inappropriate for Kamala Harris to have access to the Biden-Harris funds. I think this is also going to be a non-starter. And the reason is she always had access to those funds. It was Biden and Harris. So this would have been a different discussion if Harris was not the nominee. If Harris is not the nominee, then strangely, like it's such a big difference. So because she's the nominee and because she was already on the ticket, she gets 100% of that money. If it went to another candidate, say like Buttigieg, that campaign could only give Buttigieg $2,000. Like it is such a vast difference, but it's all the difference in the world. And so they have lodged a complaint with the FEC saying that this is illegitimate. I don't think the law's on their side here either, but it may be their way of making press releases out of the complaint when the complaint itself has no legal merit.
And when you say FEC, it's your Federal Election Commission. If it were me, I would fundraise off of this. Donald Trump's trying to take our money away. I mean, she was able to raise far more than the $99 million that's sitting there. This is the kind of one of the dumb legal moves, but there'll be many, many more after that.
And it may be a moot point. She is such a phenomenal fundraiser. She might not even need the old money. She's raking in new money sort of hand over fist, which is sort of remarkable given that this race was a little bit in the doldrums when it was going to be a Biden Trump rematch. But now there's newly energized donors, including people who have never donated before. A lot of that 100 million that she just raised is from first-time donors, which is really remarkable.
The Federal Elections Commission, what would be the procedure for now that a complaint's been filed? It's not a court, it's a commission. I agree with you that it's no merit to it, but just so how long would it take to get heard and get nipped in the bud so we can't continue to just float this out there? You think?
Well, sadly, if your goal is nipping it in the bud, the FEC is a really bad place to be because they are glacially slow or they just never take action. I've been a huge critic of this agency for years. It was designed to fail and fails.
Right. Because
and what I mean by
the structure, are you going to talk about? Okay, go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah. So the structure is 3 Republicans and 3 Democrats, 3 Republicans, but they need 4 commissioners to do almost anything. And they almost never get that 4th commissioner to agree because they just split on party lines. And so they have a long history of not enforcing campaign finance law. All these years after Citizens United, they still don't have a disclosure rule for corporate donations. Like, it's just ridiculous. And so what is much more likely to happen with this complaint is it will languish like every other complaint at the commission. And maybe, 6 years later, it'll be dismissed.
Okay.
So it's a paper tiger at this point.
It is.
So to speak. Anything else that you have seen or expect on the horizon in terms of legal challenges? Are we seeing things crop up about mail-in voting again or voter ID, any of that kind of trying to suppress the vote efforts?
Yeah, as I sort of referenced earlier, Mark Elias has been Johnny on the spot for the last 4 years trying to bat down voter suppression laws. And he's won more than he's lost. But, we have a variety of courts that hear these things, a variety of circuits that hear these things. And so he hasn't won 100% of the time. But for the most part, he has been wildly successful. Now, I would say to all of your viewers, double check that you are registered to vote while you can still fix it. If you're, for whatever reason, they bounced your name, they didn't like whatever it was, re-register. and then make a plan to vote, because this election is going to be the most momentous one of our lives.
I'm glad you brought that.
Go ahead, Daniel.
I'm glad you brought that up, because here in Florida, which is ironic that they're attacking mail-in ballots, because it was Republicans in Florida and elsewhere that were the ones that the initial proponents of it. But they have recently changed the law so that if you were registered by mail, that there was a period of time where you were automatically re-registered. And they changed that here in Florida. So there's like hundreds of thousands of people who are no longer registered. So I'm sure that's happening elsewhere, but I mean, maybe that's a big issue here in Florida. And I just hope people do, like you say, check your registration for any reason. Continue to check.
That's an excellent point. Especially mail-in ballot rules have changed across the country since the 2020 election. And so if you happen to vote by mail in the 2020 election, you might just have to double check your local rules to see that you're still eligible and that you still have an active request for a mail-in ballot. So the time to do that is like now. I'm giving you homework.
And even finding out where your precinct is,
Mine
moved. I mean, your local precinct, and that you don't, and also the hours, especially if you live in one area, you might think, oh, I know, where I live, it's open from 7 till 9. Well, that might not be, if you've moved, that might not be the case. So it's really important, right? This is the time to check this out.
If you have moved, make sure that your elections board knows your new address, because one of the weird ways that people can inadvertently disenfranchise themselves is if you move within 30 days of an election in a state that doesn't have same-day voter registration, which is a lot of them. Right. So, we have to take this super seriously and jump through the hoops, because your vote is precious.
I got one. I can't believe I'm saying this, but also check your signature on your driver's license. I ran 2 years ago. I ran as a Democrat as Attorney General in Florida, and I vote here in a pretty Republican county. And they said, well, we need to check your signature is not close enough to your driver's license. I said, well, my name's on the ballot. Here's my. I mean, in Florida, it's amazing that how difficult they are trying to make it to vote. I mean, my signature from several years ago on my driver's license was not close enough for them to not inquire. They needed more information for me to vote for myself.
That's crazy. And I'm so glad you ran. I think you should run again next time. It will be a charm. I just moved to Michigan and I had to get a new driver's license. They have a motor voter law, so I was automatically registered, and I don't think they have voter ID there, but all three of us are in swing states, so that's pretty interesting. So we were just talking about that big pile of cash, which we're, with Kamala Harris hoping to get her hands on, but maybe the point is moot, which reminded me that Senator Menendez, I think yesterday or the day before, announced that he was stepping down. As a corruption expert, do you have any thoughts on, I know we've talked about his conviction before, Chara, but on the conviction and on his resignation?
Yeah, I wrote about Bob Menendez in my new book, Corporatocracy. He is one of the candidates that I pointed out would fail what I am calling a democracy litmus test. Please do not empower corrupt politicians. They can't get back into office without our votes. So you have to be an informed voter. You have to look at what behavior a candidate has been credibly convicted of, and you can put a stop to their being in power in the future.
Can you talk a little more about your book for us?
Yeah, certainly. So it's called Corporatocracy. It comes out on Election Day. Pre-orders everywhere you buy books. And I talk about all sorts of different instances in history where corporations are really at democracy's throat. And I am worried that we're in a very perilous election season. I am sort of heartened to see Elon Musk has backed away from his $45 million a month pledge to Trump. So, and we could debate that in a future episode, like why he did that. Oh, thank you. Thank you so much.
So this is, guys, I quickly pulled this together. This is the book, Corporatocracy. This is the real cover. I love the kind of the road and the dollar sign, how to protect democracy from dark money and corrupt politicians. So congratulations on the book. And you said people can buy it wherever books are sold, including Jeff Bezos' Amazon
and Powell's.
and Powell's or your local bookstore. I know we're running a little slow on time, but so what did you say about Menendez? He fails his litmus test. What are the elements of your litmus test?
Basically, don't elect election deniers. Don't elect people who tried to overturn the 2020 election. Don't elect people who have demonstrated that they are deeply corrupt. And then I go one step further, that you should also hold corporations who fund such people to account. So the corporations that fund the Menendez of the world really do not deserve your money as a consumer or as an investor.
Such good points. And I want to follow up. Maybe, Daniel, you have some thoughts, or Chara, you have some thoughts about Menendez did resign, but he put his resignation off until August 20th. And that just feels weird. Like, I was thinking, is it because it's after the convention, or what thoughts do you have, Chara, on that?
I mean, the most generous read is he's taking care of his staffers who are going to have to find a new job. And that gives them a little lead time to line up that next employment.
That's a nice thought. You, Daniel, your thought?
Well, he's been there a long time. I'm sure he's got a lot of files and, memorabilia, pictures, and that he needs to kind of go clean out his office. But I don't know what is in there particularly, but I'm sure it's very important to him.
I just moved offices because I'm changing law schools. And, I took a picture of my empty office. Oh, it's not quite empty. I still have things to move out. But I'm fortunate I have the answer because I happen to have a photograph of his Senate office right now. And I can understand why he wants, a few more weeks.
Oh, yeah.
That's not his Senate office. That was the cash they found laying around
I'm sure
his house.
He probably still got some gold bars buried somewhere,
I mean, it could be, right? He's got some hidden trap, floor tie, I mean, that's kind of silly because he's actually there right now. I don't think they've locked him out of the Senate. But yeah.
That last episode, we called for him to step down, and I don't think I don't know if we can do it, but I'm glad he did. I mean, if anything of this, I'm glad, I guess Democrats are a little different than Republicans. When they're convicted of a crime, they quit usually. They don't just go for the next office. So.
It's true. No, I mean, at least we push our criminals out, I guess. So Chara, Professor Chara Spelliscy, thank you again for joining us. Do you promise you'll come back when we have the first case filed other than this FEC complaint?
Of course. Always a pleasure.
Great. Thank you. And thanks, everyone, for being here. We will see you again, of course, next week, always Wednesday at 2 p.m. Daniel?
Yeah, thank you. And we continue to enjoy this, and any questions you have, just load them up and we'll keep pushing forward.
Thanks. Bye, everyone.
Bye.